This man spent $200 on a date last week. She texted him, "Thanks for a great time," and then posted pictures with another guy the next day. His friends are calling him crazy for not sliding into DMs like them. He's exhausted, broke, and starting to hate himself for caring so much. Is this you? If not, this can be you someday soon, thinking you are the problem. But let me tell you, you're not. The system is the problem. Society has convinced you that your worth as a man depends on how desperately you chase female validation. That if you're not constantly pursuing, you're somehow less of a man. But what if this entire game was designed to keep you weak, manageable, and profitable? 150 years ago, Friedrich Nietzsche knew that the man who stops chasing finds peace. But more than that, he becomes dangerous to every system that profits from his desperation. In this video, I'm going to expose the 8 psychological traps they use to keep you chasing. And at the end, I'll give you a 30-day challenge that will completely transform how the world sees you. Let's start with why your freedom terrifies them so much. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But look around. Most men have forgotten their why. They've traded their purpose for the temporary high of female attention. Their entire identity revolves around whether someone else finds them attractive. This is the first trap: pressure to pursue. You've been programmed to believe that not chasing makes you less of a man, that real men are always in pursuit, always hunting, always proving their worth through conquest. But Nietzsche would laugh at this. He'd call it slave morality, measuring your value by someone else's reaction. The man with a real why, a mission, a purpose, a vision, doesn't have time to beg for validation. He's too busy building something that matters. And that focus, that self-direction, becomes magnetic in a way desperation never could be. But here's where it gets dangerous for them. Second trap: validation addiction. You chase women to feel worthy, and every rejection destroys a piece of your self-respect. You've become a junkie, and female approval is your drug. Think about your last conversation with a woman. How many times did you change what you said to get a better reaction? How many times did you agree with something you didn't believe? How many times did you perform instead of just being yourself? This is what Nietzsche called the slave mentality, when your worth depends entirely on someone else's opinion. And here's the brutal truth. Every time you chase validation, you're training yourself to be weak. You know what's insane? The dating industry makes $8 billion a year. $8 billion. All of it built on convincing men they're not enough as they are, that they need this course, these clothes, these lines to be worthy of love. But what if the opposite was true? Third trap: desperation kills attraction. The harder you chase, the weaker you look. It's like trying to catch water with your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. Women can smell desperation from miles away. Not because they're cruel, but because desperation signals low value. It screams, "I don't think I'm good enough, so please validate me." And nobody, a man or woman, is attracted to that energy. Fourth trap: being used for attention. She knows you're interested. She knows you drop everything for her. So she keeps you around for the ego boost, the false hope, the emotional support, while giving her real attention to someone who doesn't chase her at all. You've become her entertainment, her validation dispenser, her backup plan. And you accept it because you're terrified of losing even the scraps of attention she throws your way. This is where most men break, but some men wake up. Fifth trap: peer pressure. Your friends think you're crazy for not chasing women like them. They call you gay, boring, a quitter, because your breakthrough threatens their worldview. If you can be happy without constantly chasing validation, what does that say about their lifestyle? Sixth trap: cultural conditioning. Every movie, every song, every story tells you that the hero gets the girl. That romantic conquest is the ultimate prize. Hollywood has programmed you to believe that your story isn't complete without a woman's approval. But Nietzsche understood that culture creates sheep, not lions. The herd follows these narratives because thinking for yourself is terrifying. It's easier to follow the script than to write your own story. Seventh trap: fear of loneliness. You chase because you're afraid of being alone with yourself. Because when the noise stops, when the distractions end, you might have to face the truth. You don't even like who you are. But here's what they don't tell you. The man who's afraid of his own company will never be good company for anyone else. Eighth trap: financial drain. Add up what you spent last year trying to impress women, dates, clothes, cheap steroids, dating apps, courses promising to make you irresistible. Now imagine if you'd invested that money in yourself, in your skills, your business, your actual growth. While you're spending resources trying to become attractive to others, you're not investing in becoming valuable to yourself. While you're performing for approval, you're not building anything real. The man who stops chasing redirects all that energy inward. He becomes genuinely interesting instead of desperately interested. He becomes actually valuable instead of just trying to appear valuable. And value, real value, is always more attractive than performance. Here's where it gets interesting. When you stop chasing, several things happen that break society's brain. You become a mystery. In a world full of desperate men, scarcity creates curiosity. Women start wondering why you're different, why you're not in their DMs, why you don't seem to need their approval like every other guy. People call you cold or arrogant. Society fears what it can't control. They need you to be predictable, manageable, desperate for their approval. When you're not, they attack with labels designed to shame you back into line. Women label you dangerous, not because you're threatening, but because you're unpredictable. You can't be manipulated through attention. You can't be controlled through approval. You don't need their validation to feel valuable. And this terrifies women who are used to having that power over men. Men hate you too. Your friends get insecure when you don't play their game. Your peace exposes their desperation. Your self-sufficiency makes their neediness obvious. So they pressure you to come back to the herd where they feel safe. If you never stop chasing, here's what happens: burnout and depression. Chasing attention leaves you empty. You're running on the hamster wheel of validation, always moving, but never arriving. The highs get shorter, the lows get deeper, and eventually you realize you've been chasing shadows. Career and purpose neglect. While you're wasting energy on validation, your real potential dies. Your business ideas collect dust. Your goals get pushed aside. Your dreams become secondary to your need for approval. Loss of masculine frame. You operate from need, not power. From scarcity, not abundance. From fear, not confidence. You become a beggar in the kingdom of your own life. You never build real confidence. Only external approval feeds you, so you're always hungry. You never develop the internal strength that comes from self-validation. You never learn to be enough for yourself. This is the hidden cost of the chase. You lose yourself completely. Nietzsche gave us the blueprint for escaping this trap through 4 core concepts. First, will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The man who doesn't chase channels his energy into self-creation, not external validation. He builds something meaningful instead of begging for scraps of attention. Second, master versus herd morality. Society rewards conformity. Chasing is herd behavior. The master creates his own values. He doesn't ask, will they like me? He asks, am I becoming who I'm meant to be? Third, Ubermensch mindset. Create your own values. Women come as a byproduct. The Ubermensch doesn't accept society's definition of success. He writes his own rules, sets his own standards, creates his own meaning. Fourth, dangerous freedom. A man who doesn't need validation terrifies the herd. Because if one man can break free, what's stopping all men from doing the same? Here's what they'll never tell you. Society has a vested interest in keeping you needy. A man who doesn't chase validation can't be sold solutions to problems he doesn't have. He can't be manipulated through the promise of romantic success. He can't be controlled through the threat of romantic failure. Your desperation keeps their system running. You chase, you spend, you conform, you stay manageable. Dating apps need you swiping. Pickup gurus need you failing. Fashion brands need you thinking you're not attractive enough. But the moment you find your worth within yourself, you become a threat to everything they've built. Here's the paradox that destroys their entire narrative. The man who stops chasing often becomes the most chased. In a world full of desperate men, what stands out? Desperation or self-sufficiency? Need or choice? Performance or authenticity? The man who doesn't chase becomes rare. And in a market flooded with desperate men, rarity becomes valuable. Mystery becomes magnetic. Self-possession becomes irresistible. But they can't teach you this because it would destroy their business model. They need you to believe that more effort equals more results, that more chasing equals more success, that more desperation equals more attraction. It's all backwards, and Nietzsche knew it. Nietzsche's Ubermensch isn't superhuman. He's self-creating. He doesn't accept society's definition of his worth, but creates his own values based on his own vision. Think about the most attractive men you know. Are they the ones desperately texting back immediately? Are they the ones posting thirst traps for attention? Are they the ones who change their personality based on who they're talking to? They're the ones who seem complete without anyone else. They have their own mission, their own purpose, their own direction. Women are attracted to them, but they don't need that attraction to feel valuable. They've found their worth within themselves. This completeness, this self-sufficiency, this independence from external validation is what makes them truly dangerous. Because you can't control someone who doesn't need your approval. Nietzsche distinguished between two types of morality. Slave morality. Am I good enough? Do they like me? Will they choose me? The slave constantly seeks external validation and defines his worth through other people's reactions. Master morality. I am enough. I choose myself. I create my own values. The master validates himself and measures success by his own standards. Most men live in slave morality when it comes to dating. They let women determine their worth. They change their opinions to be liked. They sacrifice their authenticity to be accepted. But the man who stops chasing moves into master morality. He stops asking, will she want me? And starts asking, do I want her? He stops performing for approval and starts being himself, regardless of the reaction. Nietzsche's will to power has been misunderstood for over a century. It's not about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. It's about channeling your energy into self-creation instead of external validation. The man who chases women is giving away his power. He's letting his worth be determined by someone else's reaction. His mood depends on her response. His confidence depends on her attention. His self-image depends on her approval. But the man who doesn't chase, he's claiming his power back. He's saying, my value doesn't depend on your approval. My worth isn't determined by your reaction. My happiness isn't contingent on your attention. This shift from external to internal validation changes everything. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop following and start leading, even if you're only leading yourself. Nietzsche called it the revaluation of all values. Instead of accepting society's definition of masculine success, measured by sexual conquest, by approval, by how well you perform the dance of courtship, you create your own definition. What if your worth wasn't measured by how many women want you, but by how much you've grown as a person? What if success wasn't about getting chosen, but about becoming someone worth choosing, starting with choosing yourself? When you stop letting others define your value and start creating your own metrics for success, you become unshakable. Not because you don't care what others think, but because their opinion doesn't determine your worth. This is where real power begins. The man who doesn't chase represents something terrifying to the system: true independence. He doesn't need constant reassurance. He doesn't need external validation to feel valuable. He doesn't need someone else to complete him because he's learned to complete himself. And independence, true independence, is the most threatening force in a world built on dependence. Because independent people can't be controlled. They can't be manipulated. They can't be sold solutions to problems they don't have. They become immune to the psychological weapons that keep others trapped. Self-validation isn't selfish. It's revolutionary. Because a man who can validate himself will never be a slave to those who can't. When you approve of yourself, you stop needing others to approve of you. When you choose yourself, you stop desperately hoping to be chosen. When you complete yourself, you stop looking for someone else to fill the void. This self-sufficiency becomes magnetic in a way that neediness never could be. People are drawn to those who don't need them because it means if they choose to be with them, it's a choice, not a desperation. But society doesn't want you to understand this because self-sufficient men are bad for business. Nietzsche wrote about amor fati, love of one's fate. The man who doesn't chase has learned to love his fate, whether it includes romantic success or not. He's found peace with the possibility of being alone. Not because he's given up, but because he's discovered that being alone is not the same as being incomplete. That solitude can be peaceful instead of painful. That his own company can be enough. This acceptance gives him incredible power. Because when you're not afraid of being alone, you can't be controlled through the threat of loneliness. When you're complete within yourself, you can't be manipulated through the promise of completion. The man who stops chasing kills the nice guy inside himself. Not because he becomes mean, but because he stops using niceness as a strategy for getting what he wants. He's not nice to get something back. He's not kind to be rewarded. He's not generous to be owed. He's authentic, which sometimes means being nice, and sometimes means setting boundaries that others won't like. This authenticity is what makes him truly attractive. Not the performance of niceness, but the genuine expression of his values. Not the desperate attempt to please everyone, but the selective choice to invest in people who deserve it. Authenticity is magnetic because it's rare. In a world of performative masculinity, genuine self-possession stands out. In a culture of desperate validation seeking, authentic confidence draws attention. The man who doesn't chase isn't performing masculinity. He's embodying it. He's not trying to prove he's valuable. He knows he is. He's not seeking approval. He's providing leadership, even if it's just leadership of his own life. And this leadership, this authentic self-direction, becomes irresistible. Not because it's loud or dominant, but because it's real. Because it comes from genuine strength instead of compensating for weakness. When you stop chasing, watch how quickly society mobilizes to shame you back into line. You'll be called incel, bitter, antisocial, afraid of rejection. But here's what they're really afraid of. They're afraid you found something they can't sell you. They're afraid you've discovered a source of validation they can't control. They're afraid you've become immune to their psychological manipulation. Nietzsche understood this. He knew that the herd always attacks what threatens its comfortable illusions. When you stop participating in their game, you expose the game for what it is. The revolution isn't coming from outside, it's coming from within. It starts with the simple, terrifying, beautiful choice to be enough exactly as you are. To stop chasing validation and start creating value. To stop seeking approval and start approving of yourself. To stop hoping to be chosen and start choosing yourself. This choice, this shift, this internal revolution is what changes everything. Because when you change, the world around you changes. When you stop playing their game, they have to adjust to your rules. Here's my challenge to you. For the next 30 days, stop chasing. Stop seeking validation. Stop performing for approval. Stop changing yourself to be liked. Start investing in yourself. Start validating yourself. Start choosing yourself. Watch what happens. Watch how the world responds differently to a man who doesn't need their approval. Watch how attraction starts flowing toward you instead of away from you. Watch how respect replaces pity, because the chase ends where self-mastery begins. If you've made it this far, something in you recognizes this truth. Something in you knows that the chase was never about them. It was about avoiding the terrifying possibility that you might already be enough. Nietzsche's final message was simple: become who you are. But you can't become who you are while you're busy trying to become who others want you to be. You can't discover your authentic self while you're performing for approval. You can't create your own values while you're accepting everyone else's values about your worth. The man who doesn't chase has stopped performing and started being. He stopped seeking and started creating. He stopped following and started leading himself. And that leadership, that authentic self-direction, that genuine self-mastery is what makes him dangerous to every system that depends on his compliance. The revolution starts with you. Choose yourself. Become who you are. You're no longer chasing anything. You've become someone worth being chosen by, starting with yourself.